recording.
Can I call you EQ?
Yeah. So welcome back. Welcome back to Small Things Brought Together. My name is Robin Love. I also have another name, which you might discover today. And this is Small Things Brought Together, where I speak with artists about their creative process. And my main motivation for this was to have the conversations that I always want to have with other artists about like process, what's going on in your mind. And I give ourselves permission to just talk as much as we want to. So this is not a short conversation. So it's not a sound bite. So I am very honored to have Jody, Hojin, Kimmel, Sensei with me today. Hojin Sensei is a teacher in the Mountains and Rivers Order of Zen Buddhism and a long-time resident at Zen Mountain Monastery in Mount Tremper, New York. And I met Hojin, I don't even know how many years ago now.
Right.
And I actually remember being shy to tell you that I was also an artist. I kept it hidden for a while. But yeah, I feel like Hojin has taught me so much, and in fact was part of the inspiration for this whole series. In one of your workshops, you invited us to draw our breath, and just so simple, like make a line that's your breath. Inhale, exhale. And it was a very moving experience for me. And it kind of spurred me on to start this Small Things Brought Together with this idea that everyone can make a line. You don't have to call yourself an artist or anything. Even if you're using your teeth to draw, you can do it. And that's so inspiring to me. I really believe that everyone is a creator, has that creative impulse. And it's really because people get shut down at some point in their life that they think that they can't anymore. So I feel like that's been one of your big messages as an artist and as a teacher of art, and to say also that you lead retreats and workshops and guide the art practice at the monastery. And I feel like that is one of your big messages. So anyway, maybe you could just tell us a little bit about your art background as a way of introduction, and then we'll start to look at some images. So.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Ikkyo, and I'm glad to be with you. And you kind of, just how you introduced it, brought in so much of the creative process of sort of grabbing words in a never out of like a continuum, and that this continues. And it's sort of like how the creative process works, like something comes together and something appears and then it moves on. And yeah, I love how you were speaking about everyone can make a line. And really it's sort of getting past those things you spoke of. My job is to trick people that they're not doing art, they're just living. And that's the life of the line, is just living it, just staying in tune, staying connected. And even if it's not, you get to see something, and as a practice, because I'm connected with my Buddhist practice, it's seen as kind of like a mirror. So we see where we're free and where we hesitate and get self-conscious, and then we can keep deepening and growing in that, and releasing those things that hold us back and limit us to not just living our line, our simple line, our simple breath. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the first time I did art practice as part of the ongo or the intensive practice time. And there's always an assignment. And And because I have all this art experience, it was really kind of a fraught experience for me because there was so much baggage
Mm.
around. Well, now I'm making art, like capital A art, which is like the opposite of the person who maybe feels like, oh, I'm not an artist, and my kindergarten teacher told me I was horrible or whatever. So either way, there is that like mirror that happens the minute you put something on a piece of paper. It's so incredible.
Yes, and I think as expressives, it's just we're just living our life and touching materials and things, and colors and shapes or sounds or movements, and that's what we seem to have evolved to, the language we use. But it's really just an expression of how we're living, you know, and we get to see that in the work and as we're making it. Um, so in my background, you were asking how I came to arts. And I guess like I go back to being a little girl and somebody asking me, what was your first conscious experience? And I remember the first thing that popped up in my head was sand, like being very tiny and in a lot of sand. And it was warm, and it was just, I could move it around, and like we would build things, and my mom would like, and people would drip it all over my legs, and then waves would come and it would disappear, and so there was this castle, and then it would go. And I guess, and that sort of like made an imprint. We used to build bowling alleys and, use popsicle sticks. And so there's a lot of sculptural things happening that was, so I remember, joyful in my embodiment. I remember the embodiment there, and that was the imprint. And so that continued. I always sort of loved um, making things and drawing, and I was encouraged. I was encouraged. It wasn't shut down till I got to school. And then my mom had to fight a few wars there. But and so often some of us like were under the covers with a flashlight reading, and I was with a pencil drawing. And I love to draw out of darkness because my mom used to say, turn the light off, go to sleep. And there would be some light coming in, either from the moon or under the hallway, the door, and certain things would be lit up like a little bit. So I used to like to take the side of my pencil and just make the draw the things that were a little bit of an appearance, and the rest was in darkness. And so that became a big part of my work still today.
I
Yeah.
feel like as soon as you said that, I'm like, oh, I see that. I see that in your work.
Yeah.
And you also brought up a memory for me of, because I don't somehow never thought about bringing pencils and paper into bed or anything, but I used to lay in bed and just with my finger on the sheets, I would make all these drawings, and they were of course perfect in my mind.
Right. That reminds me, like sometimes in retreats, I have people, before they even dip in ink, paint that picture they always wanted to paint. No, nothing on their brush yet. And we'll still judge it. There's nothing on your paper, and people will still go, I don't really like what I just made. And I'm like, wow. So that's like kind of amazing, right? Yeah, I love that finger because I would do that too. That's where I learned like the movement of shapes, with just, how you're a little kid and you just follow the plant or the window or the latch or the light. I liked lamps. I drew. But I understood space coming out of darkness better than having a white space and creating an illusion in it. For me, it was easier to bring out light out of darkness. And
Mm.
that for me gave me a depth that I couldn't see the other way around. I don't know why, but that's how it evolved.
Mm.
And so, yeah. So then I was maybe 7 or 8, and I went on a class trip, and I saw a potter um, take a lump of clay and put it on this spinning thing, a wheel, and a vessel came out of this lump. That to me hit me in my gut, like I knew I was going to be doing that. I
Mm.
was like, I am going to make pots. Um, I just couldn't believe it. I could not believe that that came out of that lump.
In a
So,
way, that's like the same what you just described,
ah,
like darkness, something comes out of, yeah, same
exactly. So
process.
this form out of like this formless thing, you know? And like the whole thing was not so much the pot, but the space was the
Mm.
power of the pot was what wasn't there, was where I fell in,
Mm.
the darkness in the pot. And that is to me, was as I looked at them, was where the power was, like how it was filled with space. So my mom signed me up for a at a art center, and I started hand building. Didn't get on the wheel yet till I was about 18, and I did go to college, but I didn't. I wanted to take an apprenticeship. I went on a teen tour, and we stopped at the San Ildefonso family pottery in New Mexico, and they have that's where I was introduced to this idea of an apprenticeship where you would study with a master and live there and like follow their customs. And it just felt so holistic, like you weren't, because I saw it as my life. And it was just like, it wasn't like, I always felt like, why do I have to call it like art or
Mm.
become an art major? I just felt weird about that. It's just like, this is everyone's domain. Like,
Yeah.
I couldn't get that. But objects started to become fascinating, just like things made that we think of, like how we make things, like to even think of them was fascinating. And so I was really interested in an apprenticeship. I came home, I told my mom, they were not thrilled. And I had the good fortune and opportunity to go to college that they were going to send me. And they said, why don't you just try? And if you don't like it, you don't have to go, but you can't say that if you don't do it. So I thought, all right. But I thought, I'm going to try anthropology or archaeology or environmental bio. And then I'll do art classes on the side, because I was still like, I'm not going to be an art major. And those were my, interests. Well, I was too impatient to be an archaeologist. I would find stuff and dig it out too quick. But, I started to see, go to museums and see the power of tiny little sculptures of a bone, or just in the shape of a female body, and just like, whoa, like nothing done to it, just like a couple curves. And I knew, and it
Mm.
was like, and why did somebody take the time to do that? Like,
Mm.
so we want to, there's this impulse to make beauty or respond to our environment with creation, right?
Mm.
And and then at the same time I saw, I started to get on the wheel, and my teacher was very formal, European formal, like everything had these proportions.
Oh.
Not. I'm not. I was crooked, wobbly. I was just trying to center, which was like, years and years and years. And then I went to a Japanese tea bowl exhibit,
Mm.
and I was put in my hands was a bowl that was repaired with
Mm.
gold line.
Oh, yeah. Was this in Philadelphia?
It was up in upstate Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay.
But I did go in Philadelphia too. And it was by a nun. Her name was Rengetsu.
Mhm.
And it was so deeply centered, but it was asymmetrical, repaired, kind of rough, like this rough glaze. And I just, again, I got that visceral bodily feeling, like a rightness, like it just was like, oh my God, like who did this? Who allowed this to happen? Because I hadn't seen anything like it and held it. And then I saw more of that.
I'm getting chills. I didn't know you actually like handled a Rengetsu
I did.
pot. Wow.
Yeah. And some others, Chochiro, there was some other ones from early Japanese. And so I switched to an art major, and so I could study more deeply the tradition of art and of object making and techniques and things like that. So that continued, and then I did my apprenticeships. I found Toshiko Takaezu, who was a living national treasure in Japanese Hawaiian, and she lived in New Jersey. And one of my teachers said, I said, I really want to do an apprenticeship. And she said, I have just the person. And it was a woman in the field of ceramics, which was from the 50s. So she made her way through in a very male dominated, which art was, field. And she was a gentle tiger. She didn't speak about Zen or anything religious, but she was giving me training of my mind and heart, and would just really be on point of my character and how I carried myself and what I was thinking. So it involved entertaining guests and wedging a lot of clay for a long time and cleaning and gardening and everything to run a household. And it was working with a woman, and it was quite beautiful. We traveled some, and then I did another apprenticeship in wood firing with another Japanese teacher, again in America. Never went to Japan yet. They were all here, and learned the art of wood firing and kiln building on Anagama. And I stayed with him for about 6 years, all through the seasons. Um, and at the same time, I always drew and painted and filled sketchbooks after sketchbooks, just studying what was right in front of me. And then I found the monastery. Did you want to come in at all? I can keep talking, but
Well, I'm thinking, yeah, I guess I find it super interesting. I don't know that I ever really thought or maybe really sat with the idea that you did these apprenticeships, which in some ways were a kind of preparation to live in a monastery. I mean, it's this
yeah,
immersive whole life teaching by example, learning, like whole body learning
yes,
thing.
that's
So
right. I
yeah.
didn't know it either, but it was body teaching and just living, and very, very much so. Yeah. And yes,
Well,
so
I'm going to share my screen because do want to look at some recent work.
okay.
So I feel like I'm going to be the timekeeper, and because I do feel like I would gladly talk all day with you. All right, let me just move us, and I'll start the slideshow. Oops, what? Show anyway. I'm not sure what that means.
Show it anyway.
Oh, that's weird. It was working perfectly.
Here.
Oh, here we go. Maybe it's because what's going on? Why is it? Okay, maybe it's just this first slide doesn't want to go. All right, let's see if that works. Oh, how strange. Um, all right, I'm gonna stop the share. I'm not sure what's happening, but let me just see. Maybe it's escape. I'm just gonna, sorry, I am gonna
You
take
want to
a,
pause recording and pick up?
yeah, why don't we do that? All right, so hold fast, as we say in Newfoundland.
Still
I'm
recording.
gonna pause the, we're back. Let's try that one again. Ba-bum. Okay. So I chose this. I don't know if you meant to send me this
I
image.
didn't, but
So I put it at the beginning because I thought, well, it sets a certain tone.
yes, and that's my favorite Kuan Yin in the royal ease. I take up the royal ease as my life's kind of koan.
Mm.
So I like this Kuan Yin the best. Somebody got it for me, and just to be able to sit like that and hear the cries of the world, which
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah. Huh. So or this is also where I sort of take some liberties and I organize things according to like what I see from what you sent me, try to make sense of them in my own
Yeah.
thing. So I started with the Kuan Yin, and then this is the 10 ox herding pictures, correct?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe you want to, so I had the whole, and I think I got them in the right order in
Okay.
terms of the detail
Oh,
shots.
great.
Maybe you want to just talk about what are the ox herding pictures, because probably some people don't know what that
Okay,
is.
so the 10 ox herding pictures is a traditional um, picto thing, which shows the path of enlightenment. And the ox is how we discover who we are. The ox is represented as the self. So it's the search for the self. Who are we? Who
Mm.
are we? So this is a little further. So I started to do this with found materials. It was summer, and I had a blop of paint that fell, and I was like, I put horns on it. I was like, this looks like an ox. And then that's how the process started. I started to make oxes, and then I thought, let me look at the ox herding pictures, and it would give me an opportunity to learn the poems and over again, and learn the images that go along with it, and perhaps find a new illustration or some other way to, I don't know, I just enjoyed the kind of the frame of like, I know what I'm doing here. There's 10 ox herding pictures. Yeah. So I
So
would, yeah.
uh, I guess I didn't realize, are there also like the images themselves? Is there a tradition of like the first one always has this and the second one always has that?
Pretty much so, from what I've seen. So there's that first one, which this is made. I was kind of getting a little obsessive. Every drop it came an ox. Every smear, soy sauce, clay. Like if it landed on a piece of paper, I was like, an ox would start another series. And I like that way of working, where it's like a surprise, like, oh, I got a smear, and like I look at it, and it's like making an ox would come. So there's the search, and then there's finding the traces where you see the footprints, and then you see it, like you get a glimpse of yourself, but you're not sure what you're looking at. It's not all there. It's kind of like in the dark a bit, and a little piece is sticking out. There it is again. And then you finally catch sight of it, and but it's pretty wild. There's a big tug of war going on, and then from like working with yourself, it gets more tame. You begin to understand who you are, and it calms down a bit after you see it. And then um, you can like ride it yourself more freely. You can understand all your habits better and where they're coming from, and it's easier to ride yourself. And then there's that moment where you just forget the self, and then you transcend ox self, and you just feel the source, the 10,000 things moving through you, and then that just comes into the world. And it's portrayed as a sequence, step by step, but we might find ourselves at different places at different times. So it's kind of all at once at the same time. You may find yourself taming and then back to searching again, but it's always different because you've learned something perhaps. So it's
Mm,
interchangeable. Yeah.
mm,
So
mm.
this is a different one, but you can see this was in the garden, and there's stuff made from just grass and real live flowers. That last one always has red blossoms. And then I started to make Returning to the Marketplace a female. It's portrayed as a male. And
Mm.
in this one, you can see the catching and the actual human figure. I'm doing more as a feminine, um, in a more of a woman's body. Than the little guy.
Yeah,
Tradition. It's always been the guy going out for the search. I haven't seen many of a woman's search
yeah.
or a non-binary search for the ox, you know. So I'm kind of working with who that human being is.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, this is, I guess, the
Yes, so you can see sometimes I'll add a little bit of brush or pen, but mostly like the enso is done with a marigold.
hmm. Yeah, I think these are the next ones actually that oh no, I wanted to get all of them in there. Yeah, so these are
Yeah. So,
juicing.
so
Wait,
this is watercolor. So
oh, watercolor.
I
Okay.
would take a piece. So I would take a piece of a leaf because it was autumn, and there were, autumn has so many colors in the leaves. So I would just take a bit, and then I would pull out, like in watercolor, all the variations I could find. And this is not all of them, but I love dots. So I would
Mm,
take the real thing and then try and match like a watercolor mix of
mhm, mhm.
what I was seeing and in the
Oh,
mix.
because I know you do like in the previous where you actually take plant material and
Yes,
use it as your like pigment and just so directly on the
right.
paper. Yeah.
And this was the reverse, just taking something and using what comes in a paint box and sometimes rubbing it, and
Mhm.
to see the difference, like a green from a box and a green from the thing itself.
Uh-huh,
And
right.
it's just astounding. It's like you can never, it's like hard to use paint again once you use like a piece of grass. It's like, oh my God, that is not green. Um, and
Yeah.
I love the oxidation that happens, So I would just paste them on and then cover them with like like a Mod Podge or something.
Oh, so they're a
Yeah,
bit sealed up.
yeah,
Huh, interesting.
to keep it fresh. And this is by the river. This is what I call rock juicing. And this is just, I would rub rocks like how we used to get pigments, by grinding. So this is just sedimentary rocks sitting by the river. And I would just grind them on another rock and then do one stroke at a time, just
Wow.
one breath at a time. And so I was like, oh, this is just like people. Like it seems like we could say this is the same rock, but it's not. It's got a different tone. It's
Mm,
its own rock, and a
mm.
slightly different color will come out. And then I would start putting that on my face and legs and jumping. So I became it covered too,
I mean, some of these colors are incredible. I mean,
right?
they're all incredible, but some of them are, like, stunning. I mean,
Stunning.
like,
And I
what?
love the surprise, it's just like, oh my God, this came out of a rock. So I call the whole process juicing, whether it's from a plant or a rock or in the kitchen, just juicing like what's on the spice rack or in a beet or, you
Mm,
know,
Mm.
And it started because I was in the kitchen cooking at the monastery, and everyone went off to do art practice. And I was like, hell, I'm not going to miss this. So I started dipping my brush into all the food I was making. And I was like, I've got a, I've got a whole image made of tomato sauce. So, and then I began to take that into retreats of this no big dealness, and seeing like, we've got a paint box right where we're standing, dust, toothpaste, Pepto-Bismol, colors that cover our pills. Like, colors are everywhere in cereal. You'd be surprised where you can get color from. So we don't have to wait for the Dick Blick order or spend a lot of money. And it goes back to the primitive times. It was from scraping rocks and rust and wherever colors come from, you know? So I like to like take away that we need special equipment or materials.
I feel like, especially now where because of COVID, we're all quite connected to our digital experience, like we are right this very minute.
Yes.
But there's like we're so like tipped out of balance in that way. And so for people to, reach their hands into dirt, and like
Yeah.
it feels like, it's like a way of just tipping that balance a little bit so you're in balance instead of this, like yeah, I don't know if I ever told you, I did a project at Wave Hill, which is a garden up in the Bronx. It's like a garden and they have an art thing too. And I collected basically compost from the staff, like their tea bags and using natural dyes. And I dyed a lot of wool and then invited people to come and card and learn how to spin and da da da. And it became this like massively popular thing. It was in the middle of winter. Nobody usually goes to Wave Hill in the winter. And like it became so popular that we had to like get extra assistance to help because it was like everybody wanted to come and kind of put their hands in the wool, and it was all plant dyed and do the thing. And it spanned everything. And I'm telling you, not to like brag about myself, but to say like what I took away from that was like this like craving
Yes.
that
What we
people,
yearn for.
and it's like you almost aren't aware of it until something sparks, and then it's like
Yes. And I love how you kind of and I saw some of your things, like you would be on Subway just doing your thing and like spinning and then hand it to someone, and like they were so ready to like, and it was like not like technique, like you didn't have to have a degree. You can just, it was so user friendly, and that's gets us over that fearful hump where we so learn to like, that doesn't look like a, and so all that's, we see things in museums, and everyone's got that imprint, like this is what art is, this is what things are supposed to look like, or how we're supposed to approach, and it just takes that away. It's just like people slip in and they don't even know it, and the joy takes over, and
yeah.
and the impulse just grows on that joy, and suddenly you're lost, and you just they come out of it realizing, oh my god, like
Yeah.
creation just happened.
So good. So
Yeah,
good.
so good.
Oh
Oh
yeah, these are the next few I think might even be my faves.
yeah, this one I loved so much. This was I was working with a lot of people, and dots for me are something I can do when I'm working with people, so I can work too, because it's easy. I just make a dot, I dip, and so this is rock juice, rocks mixed with watercolor. And then this was a kind of a pivotal piece because it began this sort of fragmentation of something, to like inform and deconstructing in a way,
Mhm.
or the opposite. You just don't know which way it's going. So
Yeah.
I got to make each color and then keep the dots going into this breakup. So,
Mm,
and this was just down, and I like to, that I can get dirty and like my fingerprints can show up and there's a smear. So I like all of that to be part of how it's made to show.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
this,
I really felt I felt very like I feel very aware of like it you could read it, oh, it's falling apart, or you could read it as, oh, it's being created, you know?
right.
And
And are they different?
yeah, yeah. It's funny, as I was putting this together, this I I wasn't sure how I felt about this thought that kept coming, which was like, I feel like the work you've shared, I don't know how to say it correctly, but it's like I feel like it's like just this very generous presentation that doesn't I don't feel an agenda behind it. You know, it's like very and I don't know how to say it that like gives the power of this because to say like it feels neutral makes it sound a little bland. It's not bland, but like I don't feel like you are trying to tell me something. And you know, maybe this is because I often have that in my work of like, here, look, you know. So yeah, I don't know. It's like in a way that if I like reflect another moment, I think it's very generous. There's like such a generosity of just here, here. So beautiful. And this one, oh my God. I love this one.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
beautiful.
Interesting. I mean, it's quite a buildup. Like there was a bowl there. And so, I like unfolding is what, I like miraculous unfolding, which is what is happening, is who we are. We're a miraculous unfolding. And so we often feel ourselves kind of fixed and reified as a person, but you know, it may be otherwise. And so I had a bowl here and then I covered it with like plant juice and then, but each time I touched it, I had an intention. So I wasn't like, it was very clear what I was seeing before I actually hit it. um, I would feel it first and see it first and then go. And then I would just, so each layer was fresh when it came.
Mm,
So I kind of work with that tension of waiting and then when you kind of work a lot fast and then watching and waiting for the call of the next move.
mm,
And that's why I like to work on a few at once so I don't overdo. And you get plenty of that in your life. You have ones where it's like but I like the I like to have a little struggle or a little tension sometimes where one's not working so well in my mind, and then shift that, like let that be the entry point. Like, okay, well, how does it keep coming to life? How do you keep, without killing it, how do
mm,
you keep it alive?
mm,
Yeah.
mm.
So that
Yeah.
was that one. And you can always rely on dots.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of dots myself.
I know that. I got one of your shirts. It was dots in the free store. Oh yeah. So then this is like I began looking at things. I like things. I like real concrete things. I like bottles, bowls, a plant, something like that is always like a subject. So I would again just start with a simple no look drawing, and then I was like, oh well, this has color on it, but it's not. And so I was like not condensing it. It was like,
Mm.
it's over here, no it's over here, no it's coagulating, it's coming, so it's like this breath of
Mm.
breath. Yeah. And then up at the top, those things are like, well, let me make some solid little tests here. This is a green, this is a pink square.
I mean, that's always if you start if you start to look at something and try to say, okay, you're looking at an apple. Where's the red? And when you actually try to look, it's like, well, is that red or is it moving into green? Or is that actually, it's hard to pin down.
And what is red? And,
Yeah.
you know, I could do it in yellow and say it's red, you know. We've agreed it's red, but so my thing here was to kind of get it to go back to the paper, like to white, to,
Mm,
to disappear into white again. So there's a lot of white coming back again, a lot of paper coming back again.
hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. So this
Yeah,
was like,
I bunched a few of the more plant
yeah. So
plant.
this is part of that. I was on vacation and I was sitting by the creek and just these were the ones coming out at that time. I
Hmm.
usually have like a burst, a series, and then
Are these all the same? Like the one with the sort of line that was a bowl and then had lines and then had dots. Was that how big was that? What was
that's that paper, like 12 by 9.5 or something.
and
Yeah.
these are about the same?
Yeah. These are the same.
Because I know you've done some really
Yeah.
teeny.
I haven't been doing minis or, yeah, no, I'm bigger now. Bigger now. Oops. That's a rotate.
Oh, you know what? This one I was like, is it this? Or
Yeah.
is it this? Or is it this? Or is it this? So I have it upside down.
The blue, like shells kind of shape up in the top left. That's the top.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
So,
right. I don't think I can spontaneously spin it right now, but
okay, that's fine. And this is fine like this because I do turn it when I work. So this is like just this is was so interesting because it has this dreamy quality, which I'm not usually, like that. But it was more just you could see I broke out these pens, these colored pens, and the dots now became like constellations, like connections, points of where forms are meeting or connected. And I would
Mhm.
actually use these pens. I started connecting the dots and just it was just slow and just watching and just like needs this here. I'll try. Yeah, and so it would just be that, just growing. And then these dots were the kind of the connectors of like relationships. It was about relationships and
Mm,
actually connecting them to one another.
mm, mm.
That was the conjunction of Saturn, this convergence that
Oh,
happened.
yeah, yeah,
That
yeah.
that was that night, and my response to that world,
Mm.
and my pen's breaking. And so I want to use these pens. So it was all about pens. That's it.
Right.
And then it started with these weeds. You can see I started with just like the starkness of these weeds outside, and the wasn't quite winter yet, but we were moving into it. And then from there I started the connections with the lines, and then
Mm.
color came in, and I just allowed it to just, you know like kind of do the this eclipse that was happening.
So can I ask you, since, the monastery schedule is full, let's say, you don't have a lot of time to diddle around in a studio like I do. And so
The
so
problem.
for you, is drawing just something you might do when you catch a moment, or do you kind of do it every day, or is it just there's no rule?
That's a good question. No rules. And it's like I'm hardwired that way. So like I said, a smudge will happen while I'm at my desk and I'm already into the new image. So like I don't need like time. I am that time,
Hmm.
and I can create any time, and it comes in all these different ways. And so it's like that's what I mean, no big deal. I'm not need, and my life sort of dictates that. It's because I don't have what we might call time, but I do.
Mhm.
I'm the boss. And, I just turn like, as far as I'm concerned, my whole life is working in the studio.
Mm.
It's just what I'm living is the studio. And sometimes I sit still, and sometimes I make marks, and sometimes you know, so I could be writing something on my computer, I print it out, I'm done with it, and I might have white paint in my drawer, and all I need is a paintbrush to cover some of that typed stuff, and I'm on my way. And I love the surprise of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm. I find that very, I don't know, inspiring or encouraging. Because I've also had that feeling of like, why is there a divide? Now I'm making art. Now I'm living my life. Like to me, it's all one,
Yeah.
and but my life is divided up into art project, you
Yeah.
know, so but there's for me, I've always felt that disconnect of like, well, it doesn't actually seem quite correct somehow, but
Mhm.
I love how you just said that.
Yeah, and also like you are a working artist, so part of what you've focused on is to show and so you do need that kind of production.
Yeah.
Um, but how you think about that maybe is what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a funny time right now with COVID where we're Newfoundland is back on lockdown.
Oh,
And it's like strange time has become so bizarre. Like strangely
yeah.
unstructured and then strangely confined, So it's yeah, I don't know. I feel like I don't have a clear grasp on how I understand it currently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was at night. It doesn't look like it there.
I see it. I see it.
Yeah.
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 So here. Uh-huh. So then I put three images. I feel like they go together. There's this one, and then this one,
Yeah.
and then this
Yeah.
one.
So, I could see when besides dots, I see bowls as kind of a dot too. Like when I don't know what to do, I'll just draw a bowl because I can never exhaust like trying to paint a bowl. And they just endlessly. By the way, this is the one that's under all those dots with that. So this is part of that one now. That does not exist.
Oh.
Yeah. So that was a bowl. Then it was covered with this purple petunia, and then did more layers. So that's part of that one. Um, and the next ones are, yeah. So we did on Zoom. I've been doing Zoom since we went into COVID quarantine since March. Doing it online with people, and one person said, um, they would love to like explore red. So we had a day where everyone had to wear red, work in red, write about red, and held the question of what is red. But for me, I wanted the whole Zoom to be the piece.
Mm.
So I wanted to see every square red and
Yeah.
doing something red. And I had to shut it off at one point because this guy who's like 70 some years old was like wearing a red bandana. He had red lights around his neck. His room was red, and I was hysterical. Um,
Did you take
so,
any screenshot or
yeah,
anything?
I did. I could send you that. Um, I have many of them. People sent me them too of the redness. I'll send you that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this was, I moved to chalk, and because I was feeling red, I was working with red and just making red bowls. exploring red.
So this is a red.
Yes, with my red pen, connecting again to the edges and beyond. It's interesting to see it on this. It's so different.
Yeah, I mean, it makes me think also about when we set some kind of parameter, you could think, oh, red, that's such like a narrow thing. It's only one color, blah, blah, blah. But it's infinite. It's infinite.
Right. And I made this with green. So red, red was the last thing I put on, but underneath is green.
Yeah, isn't
Started green. So
I love that. I mean, it's like the story of life. I started in green and I ended up red.
right, exactly. I was like, well, better get my red in there, but you don't know red without its complement, like you don't know up without down. You don't know yeah, so I thought I would use its complement and figure out why is that a compliment?
Oh my God, I feel like I'm having like a little head explosion because, it's like a painterly, I don't know, trick, right? Is to put a ground of color
Yes,
that's the complement of what you intend to be. And that
exactly.
makes it so rich. Like the red is even more red somehow because the green is underneath. And like that
Exactly.
is like life. Like, oh, I did this thing and it was blah, blah, blah. But now it's like so rich because
Exactly.
opposite.
Right. It's like the lotus and the swamp that it grows in.
Yeah.
Like I one time picked one because I wanted to take it home and I put it in fresh water. It died. So this beautiful, like blossomed lotus needs this darkness and this muck with all the nutrients to
Mm.
flourish. So you can't have one without the other, the darkness without that
Mm.
beauty, that brightness.
Mm.
Yeah.
I never thought of it like that, but until this very moment, I like it. Okay, so then these are your most recent,
Yeah.
or at
Well,
least the
actually,
beginning of COVID?
well, yeah, this is not the most recent, but this was going into COVID. And this was from the image of Black lives being waiting to be put into the ground as a burial. And they didn't have enough materials, that some were just wrapped. And so I used hickory nuts, which were falling and reminded me of, and I darkened them, and they were all kinds of tones. And then I very carefully wrapped some in this special kind of rice silk paper
Mhm.
and created this burial. And I was trying to learn names too, like put people to each object
Mm.
who was dying from COVID. And I just needed some way to touch the grief and the experience. So it's a small, and you could see it's like there's not enough room.
Mm.
It's just they're waiting, and some are just lying there, and they're in coffins, and it's just they would show those images of just coffins and coffins. Mostly was in South America, I believe. Yeah,
But even
Brazil.
in what is it called? Ward's Island, I think. In
Yes,
in the city, they had to
yes,
like create new mass graves.
exactly. And these bulldozers, the reason I put it in the box was because they were just carving out these sort of long trenched rectangles.
Mm.
So that
Mm.
was in March of 2020, this piece.
Mm. So it's like a year ago almost. Mm.
Yeah. And then this became kind of a COVID mandala, which is, you know, Corona is crown. And I was fascinated with that. It was the shape of a crown because it's about our thinking, and we have to kind of move from the head to the heart. So to me, this virus has something to do with getting out of our head, and there was no way to do it. Like, it knew that we had to move to the heart.
Mm.
So to me, that central piece was kind of like a heart, like with all its arteries and veins. And I began this mandala. So I saved all my tea bags, as you see, because they represented the ventilators. So the tea bags are ventilators. And that was all the imagery that was like people on ventilators and not enough ventilators. And then the shapes came from the morphing of the virus and the different. So that happened. I knew I wanted, I didn't know what was in me. So the process was cooking. I didn't know what the expression was going to be. And I went for a walk and I didn't want to paint a picture. It was just too flat. So I laid down on the floor and my boots had dragged in a bunch of like pine needles and sticks, and I realized the way the sun was coming in, all these shapes were on my floor and they were like little dancers and just like all, so I was fascinated. So I started to take the shapes and paint them.
Mm.
Like blue, I used, oddly enough, red, white, and blue.
Mm.
And the ventilators are very pale blue, the tea bags. Um, and then there's threads, which you can't see, which connects everything. This light blue thread is
I can see.
spun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the COVID mandala.
And there, I think there's one more.
Yes. So this one was made of more natural material. So I left the tea bags as they were. And this was more like how things in nature were shifting. And it's just, I was starting to put like things you couldn't think of together. That was kind of like the virus,
Mm.
like things were turning, and just the state of how the environment, like fish are showing up with like four eyes, or they have like a piece of rubber band wrapped around something, and it was just kind of showing like this virus, this dis-ease that we're in all together. So another mandala came of that, of just the nature shifting into these weird shapes, and and yet beautiful too. Like there's just, it's like such a whammo that such um destruction or weirdness could also at the same time have this kind of poignant beauty
Mm.
that makes you kind of cry. Like I remember a photographer who saw the World Trade Center had such a weird feeling because it was so incredible to see the shattering and the glass, from the fire. And it was like morbid too, like people are jumping. And so it was this strange, and I was feeling this strangeness like that, like beautiful things were occurring, and the corona was gorgeous, like these images of it with this red and this like spaceships and fuzzies, and yet look what it was doing, so there was this kind of dichotomy, or just what it was. I wasn't like, it is what it is, things are like that,
Yeah.
they have so many faces.
So these are, I assume, were like things you made and then took apart,
Yeah,
or
yeah, I
yeah.
took them apart.
Mm.
Yeah, I still have all the pieces. I could reassemble them. I
Hmm.
I kind of put them away
Yeah.
because they were little sculptures in themselves. So
Yeah.
they may reappear one day somewhere or not.
Yeah.
Sometimes I just do a burial,
Mm. Mm.
thank it.
All right. Well, that was the end of the
Okay.
so 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 beautiful.
Mm.
I do see some themes though. The dark and the light and the emerging and falling apart, and yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we'll be working with that a little this Sango, the dualities and where they meet in midair. It's like, it's like the strength of the work. I remember in mime class, that's what we had to work with, was like if you want to show nearness, then you start getting far, and that makes you feel near. So
Uh,
you have to use the power of what we so call the opposites, but they're not. It's one reality.
yeah, yeah,
You can't have one without the other.
yeah, yeah. Mm, so good.
Space and form. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I know we're reaching our limit of
Yeah.
time, so I just stay tuned. I don't go away. I'm going to just end the recording, but let's just say a goodbye and right now and say I just want to say thank you so much for this time and for sharing this process. I think it's been really yeah, inspiring and beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to share it with you. I think we both have a lot of energy in this department. And,
Yeah.
it's good to bring that to the world. It's good stuff.